welcome back to What's Stranger Than Strange. My name is Erin. On today's episode, we will be discussing a location that has a pretty extensive history in the central Illinois area. This location I have been to in person around the year 2016. And I really hope that everybody enjoys this episode. I worked really hard on compiling all of my pictures from the time that I was there and looking up history. It is a pretty interesting place, and stay tuned. The Peoria State Hospital was in operation from 1902 through 1973. Per the website that this photo came from at PeoriaStateHospital.com, P.S.H. was founded by the Peoria Women's League, who were hoping to establish a new facility for the care of those who were needing mental health assistance. The grounds were covered in 63 buildings, and now only 13 of those buildings remain. There are some other buildings as well that are spread throughout Peoria, Illinois, that have also been associated with this organization. One of those buildings is believed to be downtown in Peoria, from what I recall, and another one is actually one of the community colleges that is further in town. And fun fact, I actually attended both of the schools that are believed to have been associated with Peoria State Hospital. The buildings were initially used for, I believe, patient treatment. And I know one of the buildings that is the school that's further in town, that particular one, I took classes at night. So when I would be there in the evening, there was a couple times where odd things were going on in the building when there really wasn't supposed to be anyone else really in the halls. Like, you would hear strange noises. I know at one point I did hear lockers slamming, and our instructor actually stepped out to try to see who was making so much noise in the hallway, but there was no one else in the building except our class on that particular end. Dr. George Zeller was a surgeon in the Peoria area that was appointed superintendent and father of P.S.H. Initially called the Illinois Asylum for the Incurably Insane, Dr. Zeller did not like the name and had it changed to Peoria State Hospital. Per the P.S.H. Museum website, Dr. Zeller implemented a new type of living for patients that was not done before. He did away with restraining patients. He did away with sedating them the way that you normally would see a lot of patients in facilities like this. He took bars off of the windows. He allowed them to have what they called a work day, like an 8-hour work day, something to preoccupy their time, and basically was promoting a more free lifestyle for the patients, of course under regular supervision by staff and nursing. And he also believed that everyone was worthy of dignity and also worthy of human kindness and empathy. That was on the website. The P.S.H. Museum site states that the nursing program with Peoria State Hospital was number 1 in the nation for 34 out of the 36 years it was in operation. Next, we're going to talk about a very well-known paranormal story that comes straight out of Peoria State Hospital. The story that I am covering today does have some information online, and I will link those websites below. One of them is the lineup.com, and believe it or not, the almanac website, almanac.com, had some information about this story as well. So that is where I will be pulling some of these notes from. This account comes directly from Dr. Zeller himself. He discusses how those who were buried in the cemetery on property were usually those who had no friends, no family. They were usually deemed unclaimed. The remains of those who were claimed, of course, were taken away by their loved ones. Dr. Zeller explains that a gentleman who came into the hospital as a patient was a man who worked in a print shop originally. He began to develop an issue with coherent speech patterns. So he was having a hard time speaking clearly verbally. And then he started to develop issues with being able to communicate through writing. So when he arrived, the individual that brought him in registered him under the name A. Bookbinder. He then became known as Old Book by everyone there. Old Book was part of a group of men called the Burial Corps who would assist with funerals of the hospital's residents. Old Book would always take off his hat and cry for every patient at their funeral. And these cries were described by those who witnessed them as just very, very intense grief. And he would oftentimes stand near a very large elm tree that was on the property when he would cry. And this tree was later named the Graveyard Elm. And what I'm going to do now is actually pull up the account of Old Book where they're talking about some really, really weird occurrences that happened involving him, so that everyone can kind of get an idea of how incredibly scary the details are in this story. So now we reach Old Book's funeral. The article that I'm reading directly from, that's out of the Almanac, that article didn't say specifically what year it was that he passed. So at Old Book's funeral, it says here, more than 100 uniformed nurses gathered in addition to staff and several hundred patients. So that is very important to know, that there were a large number of people that witnessed what we're about to talk about. Dr. Zeller said that he was the individual that was officiating the funeral. So there were 4 men that were positioned around Old Book's coffin. And at this point, they have the support beams around the edges to keep the coffin up at that time. And from what I'm understanding, they went to try to pull the ropes on their sides to try to raise the coffin up so then they could remove the suspension beams, and then they would all lower him down into his plot. They were pulling on the ropes, and then all of them fell because the coffin basically was just like hovering in the air, like suspended in the air. That's what I got from it. And to continue Dr. Zeller's description, I'm quoting this directly, the nurses shrieked, half of them ran away, while the other half came over to the grave. In the midst of this commotion, a wailing voice was heard, and every eye turned toward the graveyard elm, whence it emanated. We stood transfixed, for there was Old Book, weeping and moaning in earnest. No one moved or spoke, and a paralytic fear came over us. Finally, it says, summoned the helpers to remove the coffin lid, hands trembling as they loosened the screws. Dr. Zeller said he nerved himself up to peer into the coffin, but just as he lifted the lid, the wailing sound ceased, and he gazed upon the calm features of Old Book. Everybody was invited to identify the remains. After casting a glance at the corpse, every eye wandered over to the graveyard elm. The tree stood there in all its stateliness. The apparition had vanished, and the funeral was completed. Then, after the whole thing with the funeral, then it gets even more weird. Quoting again directly from this article, a few days later, the graveyard elm began to wither, and over the next year it died. Later, after the dead limbs had dropped, workmen tried to remove the huge trunk, but they stopped after hearing at the first cut of the axe an agonized, despairing cry of pain emanating from the heart of the tree. I suggested that they burn it, which they tried. However, as soon as the flames got going around the tree's base, the men quickly extinguished them, saying to me later that the roar of the flames had become a sobbing, crying sound as often heard at funerals. And then the article goes on to explain that there was another gentleman named Phil Luciano of the Peoria Journal-Star newspaper that spoke with a man named Bill Turner, who had worked as an activity therapist at the asylum from 62 to 73. And he said that he had purchased a gravestone for Old Book in 2006. He said he had it inscribed to say, in each death he found great sorrow. He wept at each, passing tears for the unloved and forgotten. Now, Old Book, we weep for you. And the graveyard elm is now non-existent on the property. According to the gentleman that this article was talking about, Mr. Turner, he said that the tree eventually did burn to the ground after it was struck by lightning many years ago. So that story is pretty creepy. When I was preparing to go there, I had heard that story before, that there was something about a tree and that people would try to go out to that area and listen to see if they could hear anything. I have heard that some people said prior to it burning down that they witnessed crying in that area. So I never personally got to do it because the tree, I believe, was gone like well before I ever got to go and take a tour at the site. And next, we're going to talk a little bit more about the legacy of P.S.H. Peoria State Hospital closed its doors permanently in 1973. Dr. Zeller and his staff revolutionized the way that patients were cared for in this particular area of medicine. They also left a legacy of compassion for those that society tended to forget about. A lot of people would be put into these places and just they were forgotten about by their loved ones. For some reason it was considered shameful to some that they had family in places like this. It's just like the old mindset. Not everyone was that way, but there was a lot of, I feel like, stigma surrounding these places. People would just say, oh, well, this is going on with so-and-so. I'm just going to put them away and we're just not going to talk about it anymore. Peoria State Hospital Museum is a group that works to preserve the memory of Peoria State Hospital. They do haunted events for Halloween. Like, they use one of the remaining buildings, I believe, to do like a haunted house type thing. So you're already at like this super scary location, and then you're doing something that's scary on top of it. And they also do historical and paranormal tours, one of which I have been on. So we are going to move into the next section where I actually have all of my pictures put together so everyone can see what the inside of this building looked like that was in the very beginning of the video. So if you remember the big building that had like the like little pointed areas at the top, that building I actually did walk through, and I will introduce that building on the slideshow. So I hope you like the pictures that I have put together for you. Welcome to the Bowen building. This building is a building that my friend and I took a historical tour through. The tour that we took was in the fall of 2016, prior to this building's demolition in 2017. The Bowen building was believed to have been dormitories for nursing staff that cared for patients that were on the property of the Peoria State Hospital. However, during the tour, it was implied that the building could have a dual purpose in some type of care for patients that were at Peoria State Hospital. Now, my opinion upon going through the building was that it very well could have been dormitories for staff, and also kind of like an administration type building, just based on the way that it looks. Because when looking at the Bowen building in comparison to any other buildings that could have been left at that time, this one definitely stuck out compared to the rest of them. So you can tell by the way that the building looks, and then the fact that it's featured in so many photographs that were from Peoria State Hospital, like the really old photographs. It had an air of importance. Like, this building was like the main building. That was what I got from it. And with this here, we were waiting to actually go in for the tour. Our tour guides were waiting up at the area that is by the front door. And there was a pretty decent number of us that went on this tour. And by looking at the front of the building, you can see that it is, again, a pretty decent sized building. There are a number of rooms in this place. There's like 3 levels and an attic, and there's also a basement. And we'll proceed to the next image. So this right here is just showing how the building was very, very dark. So when you sign up for this tour, you have to come in and sign a waiver and stuff like that, because at that time, the building was in some pretty bad disrepair, and there was a group in that time that we had discussed before that was working to raise donations, try to work on the building to preserve the history. And the tours that they were offering, you had to bring your own flashlight because it was incredibly dark. A lot of the places that we went in the building that were outside of that first floor, like where you walk in, like the main floor, there was no lighting available. So we were pretty much walking around with our flashlights in the pitch black. Like some places, it got to the point that you couldn't see like your hand just like not that far from your face, couldn't see your hand in front of your face. And when we went in, it was fairly decent out still. But as the night progressed and it got darker and darker, there were certain areas of the building where you could only see the light that was coming in the windows at the very end of the hallways. That was only permitting lighting that was coming off of the road, like the street lamps, just to kind of give you perspective. So here we are going from the main floor, I believe, up to the second floor. Now with this, this image is one that's just showing just a quick view of one of the rooms. I know it is really blurry. It was just an image that I took kind of in passing, trying to keep up with everybody as we were initially coming into the building. That bright light that you see there next to that third little window on the wall was just my flashlight beam. It's nothing supernatural or anything like that. As we were proceeding down the hallway, there was a random baby buggy that was sitting off to the side. And I won't lie to you, that creeped me out a little bit. I am assuming that it is something that was from the hospital. The staff did a pretty good job of keeping items in the building that may have belonged to patients. Another thing that I did forget to mention about the first floor was that that main floor did have some lighting available in a certain section of it that was closest to a room where they kept a lot of historical items. So you could see like old wheelchairs that they used at the time. I did not get any pictures of that, unfortunately. But it was like, historical objects, gift shop, that kind of thing. So this, again, is another item that was believed to have belonged to a patient or, like it could have been a patient's child that was on site. This is another little basket that had a baby doll inside of it that was found in the building as well. Now, this room actually scared me quite a bit. As my friend and I were going down the hallway, walking with the guides that were doing our tour, we came around the corner and I'm shining my light into the room, not expecting to see anything in there. And I catch like a shadow of this little body, like the little head or something like that, or body sitting in the window. And I jumped backwards because I was like, oh my goodness, somebody's in there. And what was more scary was the fact that it was just like, it was shorter in stature. And then once I kind of got a clearer view as to what it was I was looking at, I'm like, oh my goodness, it's just a doll. But it's just the fact that it's like randomly sitting in the window that did scare me quite a bit. Again, to the right there, that is nothing that is paranormal. That light beam is the beam from my flashlight. And before we proceed to this level here, I'm actually going to go back to this spot. Now, on this floor that had these little dolls and the buggy and stuff like that, I believe this level was the one where we all stepped into this room that was kind of like a day room. It may have been this floor or the floor above it, but it had started to get darker outside and things kind of took a turn that I did not expect on this tour. My mindset going into this was, I want to go do a historical tour. If I see something, I see something. If I don't, I don't. And I wasn't putting a lot of pressure on myself to like see something. Honestly, I really didn't want to see anything. I didn't want to be like terrorized while we were there. I wanted to go through and just like get a good overall history of this building. And we went into a room that I guess is kind of like a day room or like a big open therapy room. And the people that were doing the tour all of a sudden bust out with, I think it was a spirit box. And I've never ever been in the presence of someone messing with things like that. I'd only seen it on TV. And as we were in the room, they said that they had been talking to some particular being that lived on that floor. And they said that it was a female that they would regularly talk to. I do not remember what they named this particular female or if this person or quote unquote person gave their name. But at first I was kind of like, okay, well, I've never seen anybody use this type of stuff before. Maybe I will, just kind of see what it's all about. And what I will tell you is, as we were all standing in the room behind a wall where like the doctors or nursing staff would have been, there was a voice that came through numerous times that definitely sounded like a female. It was definitely consistent, and it was giving intelligent answers to the questions that the tour guides were posing to them. And like I said, it had become darker outside. And I will tell you that in that moment when I heard something speak to the individual that was questioning whoever was there, when I heard those answers come through, I will tell you that I did not have a good feeling at all about whatever that was that they were talking to. I actually stepped back out of the room because I became so uncomfortable. I actually like started to not feel good as well. And I had to remove myself from the room. There were others that had gone out into the hallway too from now thinking back about it, because I met up with other people that were complete strangers and I was like, I don't want to be in that room. And other people were like, yeah, us either. We don't like that at all. Like something just wasn't right about it. And that is where like a lot of my dislike for using communication devices comes from, is because up until that point I'd never had another person do something like that in front of me. And then when I got into a situation where I had no idea that they were actually going to do that, and it was kind of like I was forced into that situation, because I mean, I didn't know how to get back out without somebody helping me. I couldn't leave the building, so I felt like I had to like be subjected to it. And then just to feel like in my gut, like that's not a person that they're talking to, that just like thoroughly freaked me out. That speaks volumes, that I'd much rather be in a dark hallway with people I don't even know, even if nobody else was out there. I'd much rather be out there than be in that room. So this is the next floor. I want to say this is the third floor. So as you can tell, the image here is just showing the disrepair for the building. Looking at the debris, might as well say, hanging from the ceiling there. You can just kind of see how stuff was falling down, like paint was peeling, ceilings were falling in certain spots, and the little wispy looking stuff that's about midway down the picture, that's just an example of like what dust would look like when you would catch it on camera with like the beam of light. So nothing paranormal, just dust. This photo as well is on that same level. This particular room, I don't believe is very far from there. Probably actually in like the same like general area, but you can see how the walls are kind of peeling in some areas. You can see how there are things hanging down up top and caution tape. There was a little bit of caution tape in certain spots that basically just had to block those areas off so that nobody walked through there thinking that it was safe. This is also on that third floor. This right here is just a doorway showing, one room leading into another. And that light spot that's right there, again, nothing paranormal, that's flashlight beam. This right here is across the room, I want to say, from either the doorway that was open or it was that spot that had all the caution tape. This is actually a hole that was in the side of the building. Because it was such an old building, some spots like this, you could just look right out and see right out into the street that just ran along the side there. So we were just kind of looking out, seeing the cars that were parked along the side of the building. Next, we moved into the attic area. So in the attic, you can see that there are some support beams that are running down this area. Looking at the outside of the building, we're up in the area where I want to say it's called like an A-frame, like where you have that kind of, like little point and it comes down at the sides. Those beams are just there to give some added support to those areas of the building. And again, looking down at the bottom there is some like little streaking things going on there. Again, that is nothing that is paranormal. That to me just looks like dust. If you go further up where it's kind of got like that weird spot coming across, I believe that was just something that was going on relating to, my flashlight, poor lighting, me probably moving as well, trying to kind of get a clear picture. And the little spot that's to the right on the bottom that kind of looks circular, again, I do not take that as anything paranormal as well. That just looks like a ball of dust. It's just the way that it picks up on camera when light hits it. It does not appear to be anything that is an orb, because an orb would have more of a iridescent shine to like the middle of it. Kind of like if you've seen, like growing up when people blow bubbles, how it has that like iridescent shine to it, but it would be kind of like a bunch of those little iridescent bubbles like inside of a big bubble, if that makes sense. I hope that kind of gives a clearer definition or a clearer way to understand how you can tell the difference between an orb and a particle of dust, or like a group of a little dust cloud or something like that. And for those of you that don't know, the television show Ghost Hunters actually investigated the Peoria State Hospital in 2013, I'm estimating. They actually have a scene from the show that actually took place in the attic where they believed that they had found some activity involving a doll. The episode, I believe, was called Prescription for Fear. If anybody wants to look at the area that they investigated, because it pretty much, from what I'm understanding, was the same building and maybe like the grounds, but we were in the same building that they did their investigation. This right here is a picture that I took standing pretty much underneath one of those beams, just looking straight up so we could kind of get a view as to how tall those sections of the ceiling were that lead up to, the highest little points of the roof. And again, if you see kind of like wispy stuff there, again, to the right of the area that we're looking at, again, that is just dust, nothing paranormal. This right here is another door that someone has spray painted around. So the door, it says death And it says, going down, anyone? And going back to this picture, I'm trying to remember exactly where this is. I want to say this door here is a door that's underneath this landing right here. So when you're in the attic, there were some places where you could kind of climb up, like it's like a metal ladder with a railing. And they did not want anybody to climb on those things during the tour just because it's a big risk anyway, because the building's pretty much like falling apart, especially up in the attic area. So you can tell, like, you can go up the stairs and then there's a landing and then there is a doorway right there. I do not fully recall what they thought these areas were used for, but I did see that they had blocked it off by putting a door right across. So it's probably the door that was over that doorway. They just laid it across so that nobody could go in there. And this picture right here gives a pretty good idea of what it looked like in the attic area, where there was a lot of, like we said before, disrepair. There's some caution tape across there trying to tell people don't get too close to those sides. The rooftop coming down right there, like what you're looking at right there, is just leading like directly outside. That area had some pretty big holes in the sides of the building right there. And there was a group that was attempting to raise money through donations and things like that to try to save the Bowen building and repair these things so that the building could be around and people could, continue to enjoy the history and take tours and things like that. So this was something that they were trying to repair. Now, once we had left the attic, we started to go back down. See, here it looks much darker, but I know that when we were up in the attic, it was a lot darker, but for some reason, those areas where they had the light poking through, I don't know why they appear so bright, because I feel like when we were there, like it was starting to get pretty dark at this point. So I don't know if maybe it was appearing lighter because of something having to do with like the sunset, like the light like coming through on that side. But I do remember that a lot of the areas that we were in were pretty dark. So I don't know, maybe it was just kind of like the sunlight was coming through pretty bright in that area in particular as it was, kind of going down. So, okay, as I said, we're going to now go from the attic and we're going all the way down to the basement. So with this is an example of how dark it was in there. So if you can imagine, if I took that flashlight away, how dark that would be right there. And then as we start to make our way back down from the attic and then through the floors that are going to get us back to the main floor and then go all the way to the basement, this is pretty much what we're seeing. So as we got kind of a little bit lower, you can kind of see how they had like the rope lights and things like that tied around the banisters again. So now we are in the basement level. So as we got to the basement level, I learned again a little bit more information that I was not too excited about. We got down into this level, and one of the individuals that was doing the tour brought up the fact that if we had basically signed up for the tour that would be like I want to say the 6-hour to 12-hour tours. I want to say more so probably the 12-hour tours. They would do certain things that I'm not really big on. It was shared with us that they would do things like sitting in a circle and do seances and things like that. And upon hearing this, I'm not gonna lie. I was like, can y'all let me out the building? Like, I'm not, I'm not excited about being here anymore. I signed up for a historical tour, not to be playing with this stuff. So down in the basement, they, as you can tell, they had a lot of toys for kids. Super creepy. Um, because they claimed on this level they got a lot of activity from children. And me again, I'm like, nah, y'all aren't talking to the kids. Like, I'm just being straight up, you're not talking to kids. So we make our way out of that room that had all the toys and like stuff on the floor, where they claimed they were communicating with kids, and we come to this area. So what I want to explain about this spot here is actually a tunnel system that runs underneath the Peoria State Hospital, under the Bowen building. So this level, to me, kind of screams like the chutes that people would use when people were sick, or, you know, like, and they would pass away, or things like that, and then they needed to get them out of the building. um it was explained that medical personnel would travel back and forth through these tunnels. If you look very closely, you can see down there that it does go down pretty far. So, what you would see in front, you kind of had to squat down, okay, if this makes sense. Kind of like, it was kind of like a doorway, but it was down. Like, you would have to kind of bend down to see it, from what I recall. And then when you look back, like, the floor goes out a little ways, and then it would kind of dip down, and then it would go out a little ways. And so way in the back there, you're kind of just seeing like another space that's kind of open. But it was explained to us as well that when certain medical personnel or like maintenance personnel as well would be down in those areas, a lot of the times people would just kind of stand there and congregate, like if they had a break, that kind of stuff. And after that, then I got my first witnessing of, I believe this is a K2 meter, the one that measures, I believe, EMF, so the electromagnetic field, things that are going on around you. If anybody is catching that I'm wrong about these, please feel free to leave a comment. Like, if I got something wrong, it's not that I haven't seen these things like on shows and stuff like that, but it's like I don't actively like seek these things out and mess with them. So I'm trying to kind of go off of memory of like seeing other people use them. But I believe these are just testing, again, like electromagnetic field, or what they would do as well is, in this instance, they are trying to communicate with something. And what you'll see is that it starts out on the left at like a green level. And then if you get responses, or there's like a spike in like energy in that area, the little green area will go up to like yellow, and then if it's real high, it goes up to like red. So it just kind of goes back and forth that direction. And now the place that they have those set down, I know my picture is kind of odd, but I just kind of took the picture however I could. I probably actually need to flip the image over. If you, I got that totally wrong, but I was trying to like kind of show like what the meter looked like from the front, but the image, I believe, should actually be flipped the other way. The meters are sitting on top of a grate that is actually very close to and kind of over that area that we were talking about. It kind of runs into that area. And they were asking questions to, I believe, two gentlemen that used to work there that were always down in that area. They would always be like, they would frequent going through the tunnels, doing like maintenance work and stuff like that. And they were known to consistently communicate their presence there. This right over here is directly to the right of that area where they had the grate that we were kind of looking into, and you could see down into the tunnels. And it was also just, right over there by that same area where the individuals were using the K2 meter. I just kind of shined my light in the room next to them and was taking pictures. I started just kind of going off on my own, like doing stuff. But like kind of staying by everybody so that I wasn't, completely by myself. Like, I'm not that crazy. I'm not going to walk out by myself. People that can do that and like walk off by themselves, like in the pitch dark and stay in places like that, they are super brave. You are not going to catch me doing that. And again, you can see kind of to the right there how there is a string of dust again to the right. And again, the bright light at the top is just the beam from my flashlight. This right here, so if you can picture everybody that was, looking at the meters and all that stuff, they're directly behind me. That room, that was the maintenance room, is to my left, just slightly behind me. And I started kind of walking off a little bit by myself because down this walkway, I believe there were other people that were down there because I remember that there was another group of people that walked off. There was like a couple of families that kind of split off from everybody when they would do that stuff. So I kind of went with them because I knew I wasn't by myself. And again, you see all those streaking particles coming down from the ceiling. Again, that is another group of dust. However, the little bright spot right there that's on the floor, I'm not entirely sure what it is that I'm seeing there. That, I'm going to be honest, I don't know. I'm also not sure if it could just be like some kind of thing that is coming off of that light that's further back in the hallway. So with that, I'm not 100% what I'm seeing in this picture. So I'm going to move on to the next picture. So I proceeded down the hallway, and then what you do is, I believe you go to the right a little ways, and you end up back in this area. Now, there were other individuals that were back in this area that I just didn't have them in the photo. And there's like a little dust thing in the middle of the picture again. That's what it looks like to me. I don't think it's anything crazy. I'm trying to look right now. Because they kept talking about how there was like kids in the basement. Like it was a high area of childlike activity. So going again to the right of this area, I walked into this room right here, okay? Now, in this room, I believe that there is some pretty high levels of dust. There was another couple that was in this same room, but they were kind of like off to the side, so you can't really see them in this picture. But there was a few of us down in here, and I stayed really close to everybody, like as they kind of started to come out of this room. But there was something that was super disturbing. I know that there was a lot of, like I said, a lot of dust, but if you look at this here, this is like right next door to this room. Like we're out in the hallway and then we're in the doorway of this room. So normally with dust, I would think you would get like a pretty decent streaking effect. You can see how I have my flashlight shining and it does look like it is catching dust. But what was odd to me was when I would stand in that room, I don't really feel like I could see, like visually see a lot of dust in the air, but my camera would look like this. When I would drop my camera, it looked like this. And so I kept messing with my camera, trying to see if something was wrong. Like it was like, I don't know if it's called like a flare or something like that, when like you pick up on like, these bright light particles. And So like here, I'm expecting it's a lot of dust that I just couldn't see with my naked eye, but like the light was catching it, my camera was catching it. It could have been flash on my camera, but I just found that kind of odd that it was just like a straight wall of just white, and I couldn't see, like I can see through it a little bit, but I couldn't see too well. But like looking outside of it, it's like this. So I was super confused. So anyway, needless to say, I started getting really like weirded out by this whole scenario, and so I started to back out a little bit. I kind of tried to slightly change like exactly where I was standing in the room. So like in this one, you can see there's like a little, like, I don't know if it's a table leg to the left there or what. And then I kind of moved just a tiny bit over, and I still am picking up that flare type looking thing. I'm just like, I'm picking up like high levels of something that's really bright, and consistently seeing this ring from my, like the ring that's on the left side from my flashlight. Next, this was just another area that it was me and like another family that were like walking around. My friend was still down there. But I went into this room after I like backed out of that area, and I went another direction in the basement. My flashlight again is shining in the corner. There's not a whole lot of detail in this picture, just kind of showing like what the walls look like and stuff like that. Now this part scared me and a couple of the people. We didn't really want to go into the room, but like randomly we walk in. We're in the basement. These people are already talking about how there's like kids and stuff down here. And that already scared me. Like I don't want to mess with, kid ghost. And we come into this room, and there's toys sitting on the floor in like a little circle. And then there's a bear like facing out of the room, like looking like dead at us. Like, yeah, I was not a fan. Like, I backed away. I was like, I don't like that room. It just gave me just bad feeling, bad vibes, because even if there's not something in there that is bad, I feel like the stuff that people were doing in there could have been like spiking activity, or just like inviting something in there that should not be there. Something that may not have been there before. I don't know. It was just my perspective on it. And this was in, I believe, another room that was on that same level. And there was this ball. It was like a little, I think it was a baseball on the floor. But yeah. So, scary kid room. And then up in the window, I wonder if that's this room. You see in the back right there, like on that middle window, there's like very, very faintly like something sitting there. I wonder if it's this little doll, but I could be wrong. And so we're kind of nearing the end of the tour. And I want to say this was a couple hours, if I remember correctly, overall. And I am down in the basement. We're all heading back in a group toward the stairwell that's going to take us back upstairs. We're just but we had to kind of pass by another one. And there was something said about this specific area. They said that there is something that likes to, I guess, scare people or pull pranks on people, that likes to hide underneath the staircase there. So I made sure that I shined my light that way, because I was already getting scared, like just hearing the story. I was like, no, thank you. And then at the top of that stairwell, there was a door. It was like a metal door that says do not enter. So we keep walking by, and then we make our way back out. And this is what the building looked like on the outside once we actually left. So this picture is a pretty good representation of, just like the spooky level of the Bowen building. Looking at it outside, it doesn't appear like it's like super, super dark, but it really is. Because if you look at the section of the building that's the furthest to the left, like that's what a majority of the areas were like when we were inside. So some of these places that we were looking where it was supposed to be later in the day, it was like we were picking up the light that was coming from behind, if that made sense, like behind the building. So it was incredibly dark inside of that building. And then that concludes our slideshow for the Bowen building. And upon leaving this facility, I did want to share a creepy thing that happened to me a couple times. So involving my phone, when I went to leave, I tried to call and let somebody know at home that I was coming home. And the phone would show me that someone was trying to call me. I believe on one of the calls it showed me the phone number. But whenever I would answer the phone, it was like there was nobody there. And I'm not even inside of the building. And I had tried to call out. I had someone try to call in. Like, it just was not working. And then when I got home, there was another call that came through. And I don't believe I could see the caller ID. But when I answered it, it was just dead air. And I kept saying, hello, hello, nothing. It was the creepiest thing that I think could have happened to end the night. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for coming back to my channel and taking the time to watch this video. I know this one is probably one of my more lengthy videos. I did put a lot of time into compiling information for this one, and I was excited to find my old pictures from when I took that tour. And if anybody has any questions, please feel free to leave some comments below. I am also still interested in reading true paranormal stories. If anybody would like to share their story online, I can definitely take a look at it and read it to our subscribers. And please do not forget to like, comment, subscribe. Definitely share this video if there's anybody you know that is interested in the paranormal and just kind of like creepy history. And do not forget to hit the notification bell so that you can be notified whenever I upload my next video. And thanks again. Until we meet again, everybody take care.